Since I was very young, I've had this irrational terror that the me in the mirror is always looking at me first. It's probably because of our creepy hallway mirror. See, the mirror at the end of our hallway gave me the heebie-jeebies, and not just because the glass was darkly tinted and scratched. I'd come out of the bathroom, turn toward my bedroom door, and stop, frozen in terror at the flutter of a pale nightgown, the black hollows of eyes staring back at me from down in the darkness at the end of the hall. For just an instant, I'd wonder if that ghostly figure was just an intruder. Then I would recognize my own silhouette, keeping a wary eye on it as I hurried down the hall to my bedroom door. That's what started the habit. Anytime I pass a mirror, anywhere, in the day or at night, I always turn my head and look to make sure it's really me and not some sort of doppelganger making faces behind my back, like the reflections sometimes do in cartoons. As a kid, the mirror I passed most often, other than the one down the end of the hall, was the bathroom mirror at school, which was really just a giant mirror wall covered in greasy fingerprints. So, every day, when at some point I'd go in to use the restroom, I'd find myself walking by that mirror, and I'd make eye contact before I entered the stall, and again when I was washing my hands at the sink. And I don't know why, but I got it in my head that my reflection was the one looking at me first. It's ridiculous, I know. You turn your head to your reflection and it's already looking at you, but that's because it moved at the same time as you. It's impossible to turn and look at your own reflection without it also staring back. You simply cannot do it. It all happens at the speed of light, which in human terms is instantaneous. Turn, look, meet your own eyes. You will never turn before your reflection. You can't be that fast. But somehow, it felt like my reflection was actually faster than me. Like, instead of the motion being simultaneous or even a fraction of a second behind, the speed it takes for the light to bounce off that silvered surface and back, it felt as if that were in reverse. Like the mirror was looking at me, staring, and that's what drew my eyes to it. Like I was always just a fraction of a second too late. And I knew it was real because I could feel its eyes on me before I turned my head, but I couldn't prove it. This was maddening and terrifying because, of course, I couldn't convince anyone to believe me. I doubt I could convince you. It sounds laughable, right? But then last week, I'm pretty sure I caught it smiling at me. Like I felt my reflection's eyes on me, and I was really annoyed and refusing to look up, telling myself that it wasn't actually looking and I just have lousy peripheral vision and that if I turned my head, it would be looking only because I was. And I kept thumbing through my phone, refusing to take what I consider to be the mirror's bait. Yes, I know this makes me sound like a crazy person, but since this is what actually happened, I want to put it all down. And finally, after finishing my email and pushing up my glasses, I at last allowed myself to look up at my own reflection, which of course was looking right back at me. Only it was smiling. Just the faintest of smiles, like the Mona Lisa. I stared in shock, and then I thought, wait, am I smiling? I didn't think I was, but then I felt my lip curl and my reflection's smile quirked up further, before turning into an abrupt scowl that matched what I was doing, and everything seemed normal again. I'm just not sure who smiled first. I'm not sure I was smiling at all before I saw my reflection smile. Was I? Logically, I must have been, but I thought I could have sworn I was frowning. If nothing else had happened after that, I'd have said I was imagining it all. But then it happened again. This time, it was unmistakable. I can prove it. I mean, no, I can't prove it. But I know it happened because it wasn't just some faint smile that might have been a facial tic. I was standing at the bus stop outside a store and could see my reflection in the window glass. I'd already made eye contact with it and done my usual dance of is it looking or am I looking, and had dismissed any concerns about it, especially since it was less noticeable than a mirror, being in transparent window glass so that I could see traffic passing behind it. Anyway, I looked down at my phone and was texting when something prickled the hairs of my nape. I just felt, I don't know, that sensation of being watched. So I lifted up my head and looked at my reflection in the window glass. I was screaming, mouth open wide, eyes so wide I could see the whites, an expression of sheer and utter terror. It was so startling that I felt my own jaw drop as I gasped, heart hammering in my chest. I almost felt my heart stop right then. And then I clapped a hand to my mouth, and my reflection did the same. And it just looked like my reflection again. But why was it? Why was I screaming? I didn't make a sound in real life. I know, because if I had, passerbys would have reacted. I was in broad daylight by a bus stop with plenty of foot traffic. That incident was the first to really shake me, because what the fuck? There's no way I would just stand there screaming silently at myself. What is going on? It's been happening more frequently, enough that friends have started asking, why do you make faces at yourself in the mirror? The question took me by surprise a couple days ago when we met for an early morning study session at a coffee shop, a place with kitschy mirrors along the wall and handmade frames. I don't, I said. The reflection makes faces at me. That made them laugh. They thought I was joking. I laughed too, because I didn't want to talk about it. But then they said, seriously though, why? I don't know, I guess I never noticed. This was such a blatant lie, and I was trying hard not to look at the mirror version of me, since I was sure my reflection would do something weird that I would then mimic. But I caught a view of motion in my periphery and instinctively turned my head. My reflection's face was contorted in a scream, eyes round and unseeing and blank with some unspeakable horror, and then it swung a hand at me. Screeching, I flung up my arm to defend myself and ended up hitting my hands against the mirror, hitting my own reflection's hand. My friend busted a gut, laughing at me. He thought I was so weird, doing it for shits and giggles. Either that, or I was just a quirky, silly girl who spooked easily. I moved out of the view of the mirror when I sat back down with him. We finished our coffee, and later, when I stood up and looked again, it was because my reflection had looked at me first. I knew it. We locked eyes. And even though it was me and did everything I did, there was something else there. I was sure of it this time. Video might be the only way to prove it's happening. The human eye may not be fast enough, but you can't fool a camera. Last night I went ahead and set it all up by myself because anybody I try to tell thinks I'm insane or just this quirky, silly, easily scared girl. And I'm not. I swear I'm not. There's something wrong with my reflection. But it got so much fucking worse while I was setting up the camera. I used this blank room in my friend's apartment. He's moving out, just cleaned up. didn't actually need to be moved out for another few days. So the place was sitting there empty and he said I was fine to use it. And it was perfect because one of the bedrooms had these mirrored closet doors from floor to ceiling. I brought a second mirror, the old dark hallway mirror from home, which I stood up against a chair. Then I set up the camera. Basically this meant the camera captured both me and the reflection of me. A reflection that bounced through the mirrored closet doors and back to the hallway mirror next to me. Real me and reflection me were thus both in the same frame at the same time. Once I set this up, I planted myself on a stool in front of the camera and opened up a book. My plan was to sit there and read, ignoring the creeping feeling of eyes on me, no matter how bad it got, with the hope that the video would catch mirror me in action while real me refused to move. Simple, right? I began to read. At first, it was really boring. I'd brought my physics textbook. I was trying to catch up on studying for exams, but it was a poor choice because I found it hard to keep my eyes pinned to the page. My gaze kept trying to rove, not because of any sense of being watched, but simply because the laws of thermodynamics was not exactly riveting stuff. I was in the middle of trying to memorize the 0th law when I felt a prickling along my nape, and it took all my willpower not to look up. I just sat there, staring at the textbook, reading over and over. If two systems are in thermal blah blah blah, meaningless garble. The words blending together while the prickle at my nape spread. The chill like ice water trickling down my back. The sensation intensified. I was desperate to look up, to see what was on the camera, but I restrained myself. Wait, I told myself. The feeling was all but unbearable now. I could practically feel cold fingers racing along my spine, the crawl of eyes over me, boring into me, the whisper of ragged breathing in my ear. I counted 10, 9, 8, 7, slowly refusing to rush myself, letting my fingers tap on the page. Finally, I raised my eyes, and I screamed. My reflection was dragging a blade across my throat. I shrieked, flinging my arms. The terrible pain that bit into my skin didn't even register as I staggered into the standing mirror, bashing into my own flailing reflection. The mirror shattered into a million glinting shards of my reflection, blood spattered, screaming, mouth so wide as to be too large for my faces, screaming and screaming and screaming. I woke up on the floor, covered in lacerations and bleeding from a cut on my neck. My friend whose apartment it was shouting my name, and there were paramedics pressing the wound on my neck to stop the bleeding. I was rushed to the hospital, and that's where I am now. No more mirrors. The staff have been told not to let me see my reflection anywhere. Apparently, it triggers me. The doctors think I tried to slit my own throat. I feel fine. I don't feel like I'm crazy. They seem to think I'm acting out for attention, that I balked at the last second because my attempt was a cry for help, and so I didn't know what to do. I wrote it all in my notebook and gave it to my friend to crowdsource advice. I don't want to be here, but they won't let me out until they're convinced I'm okay. They don't believe me about the reflections. That video I took as proof. I asked my friend to bring it to me, to bring my phone so I could show it to the doctors. Finally show them what really happened. Just a little while ago, my friend came to visit, and as requested, she brought out my phone and showed me the video. God, There's nothing for me but to describe it. In the video, you can see a girl who is me. It's hard for me to think of her as me. She looks the way that ghostly apparition in a flimsy nightgown used to look, lurking at the end of the darkened hallway at night. Like a stranger, an apparition. But I know, rationally, that she is me. She's seated by herself on a stool, holding a book in her lap. But she's not reading. She's staring fixedly into her reflection. Staring. Her lips move as she counts down from 10. Suddenly she screams, bashing herself into the standing mirror. And after she has shattered into a million pieces, she stands there in the center of the room, screaming and screaming. A long, wicked shard from the broken glass in her hand. She moves to slit her throat at the last instant. She pulls the shard away, stopping just short of cutting too deep, and she drops the shard and faints to the floor bleeding. I don't remember it happening like that, but this is proof that I recorded. When my friend showed me, I could feel my face crumple in despair, tears welling in my eyes. But the last thing I saw as my friend clicked off the phone that he was clearly regretting bringing to me was my reflection in the suddenly darkened screen. A reflection that, through those teary eyes, was smiling at me.